Hello, everybody. All right. It's nice to see you. Thank you for having me. I wrote many different versions of today's speech, I think, over the course of time, editing it down, thinking what's most important, having the perfect sentences down, only for me to be like, I will probably not use any of this today. So what I was trying to refocus on was like, what are actually the things that keep bringing me back to this topic, right? And something that was constantly circling in my mind are the things that people say to me as soon as they hear basically what I work on and what I do. Do you really think that your little anti-racism workshop is going to change the world? That sentence and many others that are similar, I have heard so many times at so many different parts, in so many different parts of the world, so many different times in my life. But basically, it doesn't even matter who it is, because on one hand you would think, okay, this is probably CEOs, MDs, politicians, right-wing voters, also people who think that advocating for humanitarian rights, for example, human rights, is basically just a waste of time or something that is some sort of agenda. But I also heard it from activists, academics, people who actually work in humanitarian organizations, and volunteers. What is clear is that oftentimes people think DEI is a waste or just basically like something that distracts us from certain things. Either profit or, for example, success, or maybe some leftist secret agenda, something's conspiratorial, or as well as like global general issues, or some things that we simply think cannot be handled at the workplace, right? So I think what was important to me is to kind of remind people what DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion is actually about. What it's about is that it's a comprehensive approach of kind of recognizing and appreciating diversity while creating inclusive and equitable environments. Now that doesn't mean that there's no limitations to this, because oftentimes what happens is exactly what I do right now is I'm trying to convince people that this is important. You know, I'm like, oh, this is important. We need to talk about it. Diversity is important. Equity is important. All of these things are important. And then it kind of stays at that stage. So one limitation oftentimes is that we're stuck in this like phase of awareness, but we don't really get into action. 4 years ago, at the height of DEI's upcoming, there were many speakers who spoke about these things. One of them was a sociologist called Anthony Jack. He did a talk, also a TED talk, which was called Access Ain't Inclusion. What he was pointing out is that it's nice if we understand that these things are important, and it's nice for us to understand, okay, we have to move from knowing things to actually doing things. But then we have to understand that just creating access, just inviting people into the structure is not going to be enough. We can hire diverse people, we can make sure that we integrate all of these different types of people, but what do we do if we're not able to either keep these people in the structures or for them to be able to actually progress in these structures, right? So what is needed is like a full revamp, or like an evolution of DEI that makes us understand we need to move from this educational aspect to like an analytical and action guided one. And that's a challenge. It's not just a challenge for the organizations that try to do DEI, it's also a challenge for DEI consultants. DEI is a young field, yeah? And that just underlies the challenges, some of them I just mentioned. But it also just means that the field being young might also just be an opportunity, because it just also signifies this is a field that adapts to the constantly evolving things that we deal with, right? For example, we look at the evolution from diversity to diversity and inclusion to diversity, equity, inclusion to diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and so on and so forth. This doesn't mean that nobody really knows what it is. It just means that this is a profession, an area of fields that constantly tries to get in contact with what people actually are asking for, what people actually need. It's constantly re-evolving, right? It's constantly rethinking what is needed to make sure that we grant people access, but then also make sure that people actually stay in these structures. Now, besides these limitations, and besides having to explain people that this being a young field doesn't mean that it's not worth actually investing into it. There are some benefits, and these benefits are quantifiable. So we do have typical benefits. Some are more social, some are more economical. We have strengthening conflict resolution skills. We have an improvement of the organizational climate, but we also have things such as increased employee satisfaction and retention, increased market relevance and customer satisfaction. There's many benefits, and you will find a lot of proof for these benefits. Now, usually when I talk about these benefits, and if just we're able to convince people to even listen to me about these topics, what comes then is like, okay, do you really need DEI though to actually achieve these benefits? There's more to these benefits than just having a diverse team, right? And some people might tell me, oh, also DEI just seems like a more complicated approach to these topics. It just makes everything more difficult. It creates conflict. It creates division. But the thing is, our world has been inherently complex. DEI is not introducing something new. DEI is highlighting something that is already there, that we have constantly tried to oversimplify and to kind of ignore, right? And that actually leads to only certain groups of people having very beneficial lives and very good lives. So it's not the acknowledgement of our differences that divides us, but the refusal to recognize and appreciate these particular differences. Because what it does is actually then creating an environment for all of us that's inclusive to all of us, that's equitable for all of us, right? So let's say you understood DEI is important. You know we have to get from educating to action. We have to do more, basically. Then the next thing is kind of, okay, but what does it have to do with me? I'm good. I don't need to do anything. Life has been difficult, but not that difficult, and I feel like people just probably need to work harder, right? I think one of the things that people underestimate is the preventive aspect of DEI. It says here, one of the most compelling aspects of DEI is its universal benefit, a safeguard that extends protection and opportunity not just to the marginalized of today, but potentially to anyone in the future. So one of the most important things is, and Heraclitus, for example, said this, there's nothing in life that's as sure as change. And that means it doesn't matter if it's about health, if it's about age, if it's about economic status, if it's about any societal shifts, we all potentially could be affected by these things, which also means that anything that we put into place today could potentially help us tomorrow, right? And that also counts for the people that we love. We probably don't want people that we love to be in situations where they potentially lose their job, so they have to leave because the way that their life works no longer fits the company, right? And we constantly try to make people fit a company, fit a job, when in reality we have to make that company and that job fit the specific person. Okay. Now, okay, we got this step and you're like, okay, now I understand. It's also important for me, but this doesn't necessarily take away from the fact that somehow this doesn't feel as structural. My life is not just about work. And obviously something that we do at work just can't influence a war somewhere, right? And that's correct. But at the same time, as much as we can acknowledge the limitations of DEI, it doesn't take away from the fact that also we spent a significant amount of time at work, roughly a third. That time that we spend at work also means that everything we do at work, the way that we are personally developing, the way that we interact with people, the things that we learn, the way that we are conditioned, are essentially going to be things that spill over into our private lives, that spill over into the things that we expect from society, from politics, right? So there is always going to be a direct link, and understanding that potential is very important, because it might be something that we take back to our communities, whatever that means to you, to our families, to the people that we love, to the places that we move to. It might be something that constantly informs the way that we handle everything on this planet, in this world. So basically bringing this back to the question that I asked in the beginning is, do I really think that my little anti-racism workshop is going to change the world? No, I don't think that, but I also don't think that it has to, right? It's about the cumulative effect of like all of these small and big things that are intentional, right? And it's also about understanding that each workshop, each conversation, each measure that we have in terms of DEI is going to potentially benefit that process. So what I would like to leave you with is, let us embrace DEI not as the ultimate solution, but as a critical component of a larger mosaic of structural change that benefits everyone, either now or in the future. Thank you.